All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to my career lounge. Today, the session will be the last session before I go on a break myself. Uh, but I'm very, very happy because this is the first time I'm going international with Miss Lisa Taylor from Canada. Lisa,
Hi,
say
Jerviel.
hi.
I'm thrilled to be your first international guest.
Yeah, man, I'm going international. I'm so happy. But also good morning to those who are from the rest part of the world, especially where Lisa stays, and all that. So thanks for doing this. We are almost like what 13 hour you mentioned,
Yeah, it's
13 hours
3
difference.
in the morning for me.
Yeah. So good morning to you and good evening to the rest of us. So today we're going to be really on time on target because Lisa has to work. Not that the rest of us we can just kind of chill and go back to sleep and all that. So we're gonna keep it right on time. But I just want to help everybody understand how I come to know Lisa, right? So I was many of you know Jeremiah, and yeah, he's always stalking me on my um posts and all that. I mean, he was on the show. So he recommended me to actually attend this masterclass by Lisa and the Challenge Factory. So it was along the line about talent revolution, and I must say it was a very good two weeks, right? About there,
Yeah.
2 weeks. Yeah, well spent, and we really talk about um this whole concept about ageism and the older workforce, etc. Which this is the key topic that we will talk. Me and Lisa will kind of talk about. But I do urge all of you to get the book. I'm going to share the link where you can get the book. I believe it's sold in major bookstores. But I really encourage all of you to read. If you're not HR, it's okay. Even you're just a peer, you're just a co-worker, I think it's also a good book for you to read. Since Lisa is my first international guest, and so I must do nicely as a host to introduce her. So Lisa is really an expert and thought leader around this whole idea of future of work. With a focus on about talent equity, demographic, and the freelance economy. And like I mentioned, she is the author of the Talent Revolution, which is something that we will talk about also as well. I just realized that in 2014, she was recognized by the Urban Land Institute as one of Canada's top 100 women. Woohoo! You go. So, and she's really recognized also by the Career Professional of Canada as a 2015 Outstanding Career Leader. I think right now she's also very involved in career development standards and all that in Canada, right? So she's sitting in lots of committees and board and all that. So very happy to have you with us, Lisa.
My pleasure.
Right. So today we're gonna do a little bit different. I'm going to post some myth or hearsay or and all that to Lisa, and then we kind of let Lisa kind of break down and see whether that's true, that's false, or what's the gray area over there. Okay. Also feel free to leave any comments and all that. I'll be taking a look at them as well. All right. So Lisa, you did this right, all in. So I'm going to be all in with you.
Right, we're all in together. That's
All
right.
in. Yeah, this is one of the things that we do in the workshop, right? You have to be all in. Okay. All right. So a little bit about the background of the current situation right now. We're going to see. I mean, we have been talking about the silver workforce. We talk about mature workers and all that. Very interesting. So Singapore, I think about 2-3 weeks ago, kind of raised the retirement and re-employment age, right? And we kind of expected it because the government did kind of prep us for a very long period of time. But what's more interesting was there was a um, what do you call that? Someone who actually wrote into a forum and said, uh, you know, these older workers have to go because they are kind of blocking the way of younger workforce, and the younger workforce can't see progression. So I was like, wow, that's a lot of, and there were a lot of conversation around what this person said, right? Because it's like, why do you say that and all that, right? So I guess this is something that we want to tackle today, right? So the first myth that I want Lisa to help us kind of unwrap is ageism only happens to older workforce. What do you think, Lisa?
Yeah, so I think societies all around the world have a really interesting relationship to age of all different ages. So, what we see is we see that people of all ages struggle with different assumptions about what's appropriate for their age, what's the right thing for them to be doing for their age. So, while ageism certainly is the easiest to spot and the most blatant when we look at specifically older people in the workforce. Um, it's true that people right from, when they're in their teens and 20s experience ageism and perceptions of, oh, youth or being silly or, being written off as not being as capable as they actually are
Mm.
simply because of age. So anytime there's an assumption made that's because of age, that doesn't go any deeper, then that's experiencing ageism. And I think that people that work in the field of looking at ageism recognize that a lot of times when you say you're going to tackle ageism, people assume you mean older people. And in fact, they assume in their mind that you mean very old people, like people who are aged as opposed to
Right.
aging. But
Mm.
we're all aging. Everybody, from the minute you're born, you're aging. And so the fact that that's seen in a negative light is such an interesting concept because we do it our entire lives, and yet we have this negative connotation with it.
Right. Right. So it can happen to anyone, right?
It can happen to anyone, and a lot of times people may perceive that they're being treated a certain way because they are younger than someone or older than someone. And then the question really is, for those of us that are in career development, in human resources, in management, in leadership, to hold judgment and to be curious, to ask questions why, to dig in to find out, is there actually a different reason and we're using age as an excuse, or is there actually ageism that's taking place? And then what do we do about it?
Yeah. You know, when you talk about this, I recall a few incidents because I have um I'm still young, of course, and I also met I also work with younger people in my past experiences. And what I hear often is that sometimes even those who are in the late 20s, right? When they have a colleague who's probably like in the mid 30s and already at that different generation, they already experience different things. This is the TikTok generation versus like the Facebook generation, right?
Sure.
I can even hear things like, oh, he's not cool.
Right.
But the thing is, they're probably only just like 7 to 8 years difference. But yet, I think that's true that really that kind of, I don't know whether to say it's a subtle sense of ageism. It really exists even when the age gap is so close.
Yeah, especially when we look to how we can separate ourselves from others, right? So you use TikTok, I use Facebook. And then we attribute that to age, where there's lots of people. There's a member on my team who is probably the most engaged in all of the leading
Mm,
softwares and technologies and social media sites, and she's in her late 50s. So, the use of technology doesn't necessarily come with age, or it's only for people who are young. But we make these kinds of shorthands and assumptions about, what's someone this age going to be like versus that age going to be like. And sometimes it's life experience, but more importantly, and within the field of career development, what we really understand is that there's different life stages and career stages. And that has a little bit to do with age, but it also has to do with, what are your family circumstances? What experience have you gathered? What's your connection to the community that you're in? How much have you learned? And what are you continuing to learn? So there's lots of dimensions that go into why someone is the way that they are, as opposed to just saying, oh, people that age are all the same. Of course, they're not.
right. So on this note, I think we also talked about it during the masterclass, which is in the HR space, and I'm pretty sure in a lot of organization theories or marketing theories, there's this thing about generation naming, right? Like Gen Z versus Gen X versus baby boomer, millennials, and all that. So just based on what you say, does this kind of generation naming make sense? Is there something wrong? How did all this come about?
Yeah, so new generations are usually sparked because something happens in the world that causes a life experience to shift the perceptions, values, and experiences of the cohort of people that are at the age where they are kind of older teens and just starting to set their perceptions of the world around them.
Right.
So generations reset because of world events around us. And it happens about every 20 years or so. I mean, sometimes something happens that's so, remarkable or incredible. The worldwide pandemic would be one of those things that's, an experience that people that are in their late teens and early 20s, this is going to reset a whole lot of assumptions that they have about the world around them that didn't exist 5 years ago, that will cause a bit of a generational reset. Because really what we're saying when we're talking about labeling generations is we're gathering up expectations of behaviors and values and norms of what it means to be a part of that cohort. And of course, it's never 100% true for each and every individual, but in general, that cohort is responding to the world around them and navigating through the world on their own. There's nothing wrong with necessarily recognizing that there are different generations, just the same way, like, there's nothing wrong with calling someone older. Jerviel, I'm
Mm,
older than you. I mean, that is a completely true and completely neutral statement. I'm older than you. Um, where we run into difficulty is where we try to prioritize
mm,
based on generational labels, or we isolate generations. Where there's real power within our workforce, within our communities, within our families, is where we recognize the benefit and the power of intergenerational relationships. So, what have I learned that you don't necessarily have that experience, and what experience have you had that I haven't had, and how can we blend those together so that we're more powerful and more knowledgeable, more curious, and more interesting, to be honest. People, getting together that cross cohorts makes things more interesting than everyone just being the same. So I think
right.
that that's the point. The point is, how do we blend things together as opposed to looking to assign the label so that then we have a program for our youngest employees and then here's the program for our oldest employees. When we're doing work and work is flowing through our companies, we don't divide it up and say, like, okay, 20-year-olds, here's your assignment, and 40-year-olds, here's your assignment. Work just flows on the way it needs to get done. We need to work together.
Right, right. I think that's a very huge thing to think about. I think especially for not just the HR practitioners, but maybe policy makers, right? Because I think I shared with Lisa previously during the masterclass is sometimes when we design all these programs, make we kind of even push them aside, even though the intention was to kind of just help them to integrate and feel belonged. But actually, what we do is we can highlighting the differences. Um,
Right.
Unknowingly or surprisingly. Yeah. So great. All right. So we debunked the first one. All right. The second one. Older workers, all right, and generally are
Yep.
more expensive to be trained, to be rehired, and therefore they do not make business sense to hire or to retain them, right? As compared to the younger people. Debunk that, Lisa.
Sure. So this is a big one, the perception that people that are older in the workforce are necessarily more expensive. It the research doesn't necessarily show that to be true. So it shows that earning potential in North America and parts of Europe and some parts of Asia, they peak when you're in your late 40s. And some of that, if you think about that, is because of some of the additional bonuses, some of the commissions. We could say that perhaps there's a little bit of ageism of why that peaks. But let's just say that the data from the salaries shows that salary and earning potential peaks when you're in your late 40s. The other
Mm,
dynamic that we know to be true about older workers is when we talk with them and we say, what's most important to you? Is it getting a continually high salary? Is it managing lots of people? Is it having a big title? Is it doing meaningful work? Is it engaging with coworkers that you enjoy to work with? The salary, the title, and managing people fall to the bottom of the priority list.
oh,
What
wow.
older workers want to do is they want to do meaningful work. They want to
Mm,
do the things that they've really enjoyed through their career. They want to attend fewer meetings. They want to manage less people. And they just want to be able to use the talent and the expertise that they have to do the work. And so sometimes what that means then is someone who's in a big job, a big job, big title, big team, let's say they're an executive vice president, might actually be really happy moving on from executive vice president into some kind of really meaningful role, reconfiguring how customer service is done within their organization, or applying what they've learned on new marketing campaigns. They don't need the big team or the big title. And because the job then is a different job within the hierarchy, most, when we talk with them, say they'd actually be fairly okay if the salary was commiserate with the level of responsibility that they were taking on, because there's a trade off. They've moved into a new life stage and they want to have a rebalancing of work and life. And with that comes a trade off on salary as well. And it's not a shocking statement for most of them, where
Mm,
employers are terrified about this, that the idea of suggesting that there could be roles that are at a lower status level within the company, that have lower pay, that the progression of where you can navigate to your career may take you backwards compared to the way that careers are supposed to go, the way that we've been used to them moving,
right.
that careers can take you backwards is something that's seen as scary, and lawyers start to come out and we start to have all kinds of discussion. But if we just talk person to person and ask people, what would be meaningful work for you for the next 20 years? A lot of times it's not the big jobs that they're looking for. They've done that. Now they want to help other people be able to accomplish great things by doing great work, but it not taking up their entire life.
Right. Yeah. And you mentioned in the book, and I remember you also talked about it in a master class, is actually hiring older workers generate more career opportunities, right?
It does, because when older workers are using their skills and expertise and what they've learned, chances are the type of work that they're doing is quite advanced. So, this idea that we need to move older workers out of the workforce so that younger workers have a place to go kind of assumes that if I have 25 years of experience and I leave, someone who has 1 or 2 years of experience can step into the job that I've been doing. That's expensive, because while my salary may be higher than that younger person, the mistakes that the younger person is going to make and the relearning that they're going to have to go through to learn things that I've already learned and acquired over the course of my experience, the company's going to have to pay for that all over again.
Right.
So, one thing that happens is that that knowledge and experience transfers. But the other thing is, if I leave an organization after 20 or 25 or 30 years of service, I'm not going to be replaced by a brand new graduate. I'm going to be replaced by someone else somewhere else in the chain. It doesn't work that way. But what does work is if I continue to work, the work that I do probably will need to be supported by juniors. So I'll need people to support me to get all the technical development done, or to get the administration done, or to put the campaigns together, or to build the programs that I'm conceiving of, or to help me teach something as instructors that I can train and then they can train. In almost every dimension of organizations and functions inside of organizations, as an experienced person, if I'm doing my work, I'm going to pull younger people into the work that I'm doing. And that's where the OECD has found, when they do research in countries all around the world, that when there is higher workforce engagement of older workers, when older workers stay working longer, youth unemployment drops. So, this idea that we need older workers to leave the workforce so that younger workers can come in is a fallacy. It actually doesn't work that way. And it's based on the idea that there's a fixed number of jobs. So we only have 10 jobs, and if you're in one of those seats, we need you to get out so someone else can come in, because we only have 10 seats. But that's not how the economy works. We can create new jobs all the time. And the last thing I'll say about this, and then I'm curious about your response and what you think about this, is
Yeah.
we've heard this before. In North America, we've heard that women can't join the workforce because men returning from war wouldn't have jobs to be able to go back to, or that we can't have jobs for newcomers to our country because we need jobs for people who are domestic and born here. All of these ideas that there's a fixed number of jobs and we need to exclude one group from participating so that other groups can have enough jobs is all false. And it creates an economy with a limited number of jobs and a limited number of perspectives. It actually serves to stifle our economy instead of what most people who say those things think is true, which is we're just protecting the ability for new people, for younger people to be able to come in and enter the workplace.
Yeah. I mean, I totally agree with that, and I think this is one of closely related to one of the thing that you talk about, which is the talent escalator. But we shall not divulge too much. I think we'll encourage people to go and get the book. But I like the point you talk about the fallacy thing. I think a lot of people always perceive things such as this or topics such as this as a zero sum game, right?
Right,
Someone has to win and then someone has to lose. Just
right,
like how we embrace the future of work, right? We talk about technology changes, AI and all that, and we just assume, oh, all these things will take over our job and therefore we will be jobless.
right,
But that's not true,
right,
because you actually create more jobs.
right,
Existing jobs will then be transformed to of higher value. So no jobs were lost, right? If you look at I'm not a historian, but if we look at across all the different industry revolution, I mean, some jobs may have been gone, but doesn't mean that there's no job opportunity. It's just that the jobs itself right now there's different type of jobs needed, and then the jobs right now, the jobs has to be transformed again for higher value, business value purpose. So I guess to your point about because you're old and then you have to move and then therefore someone younger can come in. I think that's not true. I think that is almost like a zero sum game, and that's why when I saw that foreign remark, I was fuming. I was like, what is this? I mean, I don't need my senior to get out of the way so I can move up, right?
right.
I would appreciate if my senior can be around to guide me and teach me and help me to become someone like him or her, right? And
That says more about the culture of the organization that you're
mm,
in and the way that the leadership perceives careers across the lifespan than
yeah,
what individual specific employees need to do.
yeah. Oh, we will come to that later. I think later we'll talk about how the different parties can dive, maybe some takeaways for them to kind of,
Okay.
yeah. So the next one, I'm just, mindful about time. The next question that I have, oh, where did my question go to? My gosh. Uh, right. Okay. Sorry, guys. So, uh, I think this is you probably kind of talked about it earlier, but there's also this myth about older workers have no career aspiration.
Right.
And so therefore, maybe when they're 50, 60, by then they probably wouldn't want anything else. So, then a lot of our HR programs is about, okay, how do we kind of move you out, in under this umbrella called succession planning, right?
Right.
So we just kind of want to move you slowly out. And then you talk about in your book and in the masterclass that there seems to be this expiry date that you're going to come near to.
Right.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about that,
So
please.
when we start our careers, right from when we're in our teens and 20s, we kind of get a sense of how long should a career be? So there are things like the retirement age that give us an indicator of, okay, I'm going to work until this age. And right from when we're young, we get those cues that that's the appropriate time for us to start to retire or to leave work. In Canada, our statistics department, Statistics Canada, gathers data of working age Canadians, and that's 18 to 64. Right? So there's lots of cues in lots of different materials all over the place that tells us what's an appropriate age to be working and what's an inappropriate age to be working. When should you stop? Because there's
Right.
all of these things that are giving us a sense of, you're no longer in the working age cohort. But all of that is based on really outdated information. So in North America, the retirement age was set at 65 in the 30s, and life expectancy was only 62. So we have whole generations of people that have been working their way through their career with this eye on 65 as the retirement age. You have slightly different ages in Singapore, and they're just changing.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is, there's an age, as opposed to leaving it up to when individuals are actually ready to start to withdraw and to conclude. The word in English to retire means to withdraw and to conclude. So if you think about a different way of using the word, you would say, I'm going to retire to bed. When we're finished here, Jerviel, I know you're going to be very tired and you're going to immediately retire to bed in the evening. You don't say, I'm going to retire to another job, or I'm going to retire to a party, or I'm going to retire to a golf course. You don't say that because that's not what the word means. The word means to withdraw and conclude, and it means to pull yourself away from the work that you're doing. But if the retirement age was set when life expectancy was 62, and now in Canada we have an 83-year life expectancy, what happens to people who are between the ages of 65, 60, around the retirement age, and let's say 75 or 80? They're still doing great, vibrant, healthy, lots to contribute, but all of the social cues around them are telling them it's time to withdraw and conclude. So they pull away from their work because they're getting cues that they're not important, they're not going anywhere. Nobody talks to them about the future of their career because how do you have a future focused career conversation with someone who's 61? Instead, managers shift and focus those types of conversations on younger workers. But if we had someone who was 20 and we didn't talk to them about their future until they were 32 or 33, they'd be pretty checked out and despondent and pretty disillusioned about the role that they play within the organization. We would never do that, leave someone for 10 years or 12 years or 15 years without talking to them. But we do that with older workers. We stop talking to them about their own futures. We stop showing them what the potential path could be for their future. We start using language like succession planning, special projects,
You can become
having you be a
mentor.
mentor. Exactly. All of these things that are basically code words for just slow down and pull back a little bit. We start doing that when people are in their late 40s, definitely early 50s. So by the time they hit 65, they've had 15 years where all the signs have been, we need you to move and move out of the way and move to nothing. Like there's no new job that you could be excited about. You need to move to nothing. So those of us that work in this field and that understand this, the companies that really understand how demographic change is actually even more disruptive in workplaces than technology, have recognized that you can't have 20%, 30% of your workforce non-productive for really no reason at all. There's no reason for that. It's
Right.
just outdated models of thinking about age and career and life stage.
Right. I think that's I'm so happy that we're having this like one-to-one session beyond the masterclass because I think you're able to deep dive a bit more. Um, so so just now you mentioned, and this kind of resonated with me as a HR, is we stop having those career conversations, right, with people who are perhaps older, maybe like starting from 50s and all that. And I kind of experienced and seen that before. Like, we spend a lot of time, especially during year-end performance appraisal. You tend to spend more time with the younger people. Like, this is your growth plan, this is your goals for next year. And then when it comes to the older ones, sometimes it can be tricky because sometimes it's the older workers have younger bosses, right?
Right?
That is also another nuance. And then sometimes the younger boss, they do not know how to approach, or say, how to approach the conversation and all that. So on this note, right, how should HR or superiors of older workers, approach this kind of, let's say, career planning or performance review, for example? Because I mean, from the business point of view, you know, sometimes the cost or resources, that there's constraints and all that, right? So how do you balance that? How do you have that conversation?
Yeah, so first I would say you treat your older workers, don't distinguish by age the way that you manage or work with your workforce. That, if you have a company culture where you have annual growth discussions and career discussions, why would you stop those because of age? Doing that only just sends signals of disengagement and disinterest from the company's perspective to the employee. And what we found in the research is that there's a perception that older workers are less productive. But the number one indicator of whether an employee is going to be productive or not, especially older workers, is whether their direct manager believes that they're going to be productive or not. So it's the attitude of the manager that actually impacts the performance. It's not the other way around. So if a manager believes that there's people on their team that are older, they're not going to do as well, they're not going to be as committed. These are all common things that managers that don't have a lot of experience in the skill of management,
Mm-hmm.
they may perceive that. They send those messages and their employees rise to the challenge. So if the manager is going to set the bar low, their employees are going to meet that. That's true for younger workers, but we especially see that true for older workers. So the way that the manager engages with their own staff is really the indicator of whether you're going to have a high performing team or a low performing team. And that has nothing to do with age. So the first thing that I would say is don't distinguish on age who gets a career conversation, who gets a future focused conversation. Everyone has a future, everyone. And, careers is the combination of work, life, learning, and identity.
Right.
And so, it's important that managers know how to have good career conversations, which are different than performance management conversations with people of all ages, because everybody has an interest in expressing and exploring what's next for them in their work, life, learning, and their own identity. And we can really help with that. When we talk about, right now, employee mental health and wellness in the workplace is a huge topic. Well, these conversations that integrate who am I, that's the identity piece, and where am I in the world, work, life, and learning, that's an enormous tool and an incredible superpower that human resources, career development practitioners, frontline managers can all learn how to use so that with really simple things, we see the employees that we have, we engage with them, and we show them that there's a future. That's a really important step as we're going through all the rest of the discussions of what does it mean to be a healthy workplace, to foster workplace wellness, to take care of mental health. Career related work is mental health related work. It just
Right.
has a little bit of a different type of intervention.
Yeah, right. Sure, sure. And so does that mean that succession planning is off track? Like then in that case, how should we then approach succession planning then as
Yeah.
HR?
So, I mean, succession planning is important. People are going to leave your organization at all different stages. People are going to need to move into different phases of their life and career. And I think I'm going to approach answering that with one piece from the talent escalator.
Okay, go ahead.
So, um, when I say that the retirement age used to be was set in the 1930s at 62, and now we have an 83-year lifespan, so we should be encouraging people to work longer and to stay active because they're completely capable and completely productive. Um, Most of the time, people that are in the audience or that hear me say that, especially if they're in their 50s and 60s, will say, like, oh my gosh, Lisa, like, I am so tired of doing what I'm doing. I just want to get to that age, take my check, have the cake at the party, and say, see you later. But that gets confused. People think that that means people want to stop working. But that's not actually what that person is saying. What that person is saying is, I've been doing this, I've been doing what I've been doing now for a long time and I know how to do it well. But I may not be challenged or growing anymore. I've kind of stagnated a little bit in the work that I'm doing, and I can keep doing it. But if I had to keep doing this over and over again for another 20 years, that sounds terrible. And that's because we shouldn't be encouraging people to stay where they are for another 20 years. What we should be encouraging them to do is to transition with purpose, to really explore and think about how has your life changed over the last 20 years? Where do you want work to fit within your life learning and work kind of trajectory? What type of work do you want to be doing? We need to be having meaningful career conversations, not just checking the box on, the way that your job is going, to say, what could you be doing next? Because chances are, if you've been doing the same job for 20 years, you are ready to move on. And succession planning needs to take into account that people are going to move. But what smart organizations will do is they'll have places people can move to instead of the
Mhm.
option being continue doing what you're doing for another 20 years or leave. That's what causes people to stall and dig in and stay in jobs long after they've become disillusioned. They're no longer growing, and you can feel it. You can hear it and feel it in everything that they do. And that's the sense when people say, oh, those older workers are checked out. They're not checked out, they're bored. And so they
Right.
need to find what's that next step for them.
Right. Yeah. And so, just based on whatever Lisa has shared right now, actually, we are all the same. Whether you are younger or older, we get
Right,
bored if we are been doing the same thing over and over again, right?
right.
So I guess maybe for all of you out there, maybe we should just kind of, not focus so much. It has to, divide the workforce by age or by generation. Just look at them as an entire team and as an individual themselves. I think and I think for the younger managers who are afraid to have that conversation with a older worker or older reportee, maybe sometimes it's not as scary as what you think, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's exactly the same tools and techniques as the way that you would have a good career conversation with someone of any age. And I
Mm,
think it's really important that you don't you don't inherit leadership skills or management skills. You learn them. And so, the fact that there's a manager who's younger than someone else, um, that has always been true. A lot of times that gets written up in social media, or I see posts about it, or people talk about it as if it's a brand new thing. But that has been true for decades and decades and decades. That some people are younger and they have teams of people that report to them that are older. It's only an issue if the training and skill of how do you become a manager and how do you have these conversations if the person is weak in those things. So it's more about the skills that you have as a manager as opposed to the age that you are when you are a manager. And there's lots of ways to get better at being able to have career conversations or difficult conversations, uncomfortable conversations. There's people who are really bad at that and they're in their 50s and 60s. Like that's not an age thing. That's a
right.
skill
Yeah.
thing. So we need to help people gain those skills so that they can be better managers at any age with a workforce of any age.
Yeah, I think we should all start to take that age thing out from the filter, take it out from, um, you know, being a scary factor to us, and not always like a considering factor that we need to, um, kind of over design or over plan certain things, right? Just just see them as who they are,
Right.
right? Yeah. So Lisa, I just want to shift the angle a bit because we talk quite a bit on the HR or the workplace itself. Let's talk about individual, right? Like, so typically in Singapore, I'm not sure about the rest of the world, right? But typically in Singapore, when the government moves the retirement age, I can tell you everybody's complaining. They will
Right.
be like, "Oh, you're asking me to work until I'm 60. Why can't I relax? Why can't I chill at the Bali beach? Why can't I can't relax and all that." There's always this I would say complaints. So what do you think of that? Like how should an individual, regardless of age, right? Maybe for me, someone who is going to get older over a period of time, or someone who's already 15 and 60s already, how should they kind of approach work then?
So I think it's fair, and we hear the same thing here in Canada and North America too, when there's discussion about changing the retirement age for all the same reasons, and fair enough. I think that really the individual needs to make their own choices. But if we look at and if you choose not to work past a certain age, and you have the capability to do that, that's absolutely your right and prerogative to do that, like to make your own choices. You have agency and control over your own career, and that includes when you stop working. But what we see when people actually retire is typically they will retire and take the beach vacation or go golfing or play with grandchildren. Usually, what we hear is they renovate their house, they play with their grandchildren, they go on vacation. And at some point in time, the amount of time is a little bit different for men than it is for women, but at some point in time, they say, okay, this is enough. I can't be on vacation for 30 years,
Yeah.
right? If we're going to live into our late 80s, it's possible if you retire in your late 50s that you're on vacation for 30 years. So that is too long to just be free floating where you're not beholden to anyone but yourself and nobody sees you as an individual. Nobody sees your value and worth other than in leisure type activities. So for some people, it works perfectly well. Most people will start to say, okay, that's enough. I now need to find something that I really enjoy that's going to keep me connected with the rest of the world and make things not all about me so that I'm not the center of my own universe. And when that happens, people start to develop new portfolios of careers. Some go back to work, some look for part time work, some become join boards, or
Mhm.
they do really meaningful volunteer work in their community in a way that makes sense for them. Some start to get involved with new startups and entrepreneurs and go through a bit of the ride of how you get a company off the ground. There's all different combinations. Some go back to school or take lifelong learning. There's all different combinations of things that people do. But what the data shows is they do something. So while in that moment when that age is being changed and everyone reacts and says, "Oh, this is just a grab to force us to work longer," and I know exactly. I'm not in Singapore, but I know exactly how that plays out. It's the same all around the world. It's one of the great global unifiers. If if people, did what they wanted to do, which they completely can, what they will find is at a period of time they'll want to do something. Very few people want to just continue to be on vacation for a full 30 years with nothing connecting them to work, learning, community, or other people. It's very rare. So for individuals, I think it's fair to say, yeah, you're right in the crosshairs of a change. The generation that is retiring now is the generation where we have gained 20 years of longevity. So they are the generation that when they started their life, the way we thought life was going to go is very different than the way that life is. So they're experiencing all of the change within their life cycle, where the rest of us are watching and seeing how they model this. And it'll just become my kids are in their teens. They're just going to work longer because that's what they've seen their entire life and what they've expected. So we need to recognize that that's fair to feel that way. And it's fair to leave your options open, to not foreclose on the possibility that even if you go on that beach vacation and you take your time and you retire and you say, I'm finished with working, there's a good chance that within 2 years, within 3 years, you're going to want to do something new again. And so keep the possibilities open, keep talking to people that challenge you so that you continue to have those kinds of good conversations, and watch for clues for when you're ready to re engage in meaningful ways. And then the policymakers, the HR leaders, the executives, the rest of us then need to make sure when older workers or when older people are ready to re engage, where are the spots that are the best for them to do that to make the biggest impact so that they're happy and they're helping us advance our social purpose within our country.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. So when that news came out, I was like, and that happened after the master class, and I was just okay. I'm not gonna look at what people's writing at the comments, just taking my popcorn. And true enough, right, everybody's saying the same thing. I remember my friend posted it, and I felt that I couldn't hold my tongue anymore. So I said, just because that maybe the government has shifted doesn't mean that you have to work, right? You,
Right,
you you are an agent yourself, right? You have
right,
control over your life. You can choose not to, right? They're not saying by law that you have to work, right? Is you
right.
can work up till this age. But I think that also kind of show, I think, at a societal level, there's a lot of biasness that we have towards the word or that aged life stage, right? So
Yeah,
even for my friend, for example, who say, "Oh, I go making to work," why is it that we kind of associate that, oh, just because I'm I'm 63 and 65, I shouldn't work. Work is a very tough thing for me at that age. But it I mean, it might be for some, right? For whatever reasons, but generally it's not. But it kind of reflect that we do have this kind of subconscious or unconscious bias towards old or being aged, even if even we ourselves, when we, perhaps my friends or whoever who are commenting on those things, right? Do you think that way? What's your thought on that?
yeah. There's a great campaign that was done by, I think it was done by AARP, which is the American Association of Retired Persons. And they asked people in their 20s to act out what someone in their 50s or in their 60s, how would they cross the room? How would they climb the stairs? How would they do different things? And so these 20-year-olds were mimicking very aged people. I mean, they were stooped over, they moved slowly, they reflected all of the bias of what do we think an old person looks like. And then they had people in their 50s and 60s walk into the room, and they were incredible ballet dancers, they were amazing karate, amazing in karate, they were sprinters and runners, and they had a conversation about how does our perception about decline and what happens to us when we age, how does the fear of what happens when we age actually cause us to start to think that that happens much earlier than it does? So why do we start to think that instead of people being just older, that they're aged, or that instead of them being seniors, they're, seniors needing care? A lot of times when there's discussions about older people in society, it's really focused on caregiving, like end of life kind of discussion. But there's this whole cohort of older people that are in their 50s, 60s, and 70s that don't need care. They're not aged, they're not decrepit. That's not the stage of life that they're at. We need to be able to have a better way to talk about that stage of life. And a lot of the research shows that it comes from fear. People fear getting older, and so they push it off. They make it so that it's something that feels bigger than it actually is. But as we said before, I mean, we're all aging, right? You and I are aging right now as we do this, as we have this chat
I
together.
have to pull out my cheek.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. On this note, Jeremiah, I'm not sure you want to say hi to Jeremiah.
Sure. Hi, Jeremiah.
Yeah. So he was saying something to add on, which is the perspective and worldview of locals, or I think generally when anyone who just kind of saw the news about the changes to the retirement age, the worldview of these people on career is also influencing how majority of the workers think and believe that work and retirement should be, right? Because perhaps the younger generation right now is seeing how we are responding to
Right.
this retirement age or re-employment age, and then they would think that, oh, I wouldn't want that too, because that's how the current
Right.
generation is thinking, right? So in a way, our biasness also affects everyone else.
Yeah. And so the way that we treat older workers is actually an enormous cultural cue for everybody within the workforce. So when older workers are sidelined, when they're given less important work, when their control over their own career is minimized. So when it's not emphasized, like you said, Jerviel, that this is a choice, and here are some choices, and here's some ways that we're going to support you in order for you to have great career conversations, so you can choose what is the right moment for you to start to move to the next phase of your career, whether that's including work or not including work. When we don't have those kinds of supports and people become disenchanted that are older, that then does set a precedent, and people look up to that and see, like, what's the future in this company? What's the future in this
Right.
country? If I stay here, what's likely going to happen to me? And then younger workers make all kinds of choices about that. And one example that we talked about in the master class was, often when we don't know what else to do with older workers, we make them mentors. So a mentor who's lost their sense of purpose and is disillusioned about the company that they're working for and isn't sure where they're headed next is probably going to pass that type of view down to the mentees that they're working with, as opposed to an initiative and a program that keeps people engaged and moving forward, looking ahead to see what might be next, and also links them so that knowledge can transfer across the generations. That's a much better way to do it than to just say, well, you know something, tell this person what you know.
And then that's it, right?
Right,
You've done what you can, and then thank you very much, right?
right.
So right now in the last 5 minutes, and I thought that Lisa, maybe you can just give us some golden nuggets, right? So in your masterclass and in your book, you talk about this triangle, right? Which is the companies, around companies, HR, and worker themselves.
Yeah.
So if you can give like a takeaway or action or something for these three parties individually, what would these nuggets be? Maybe
Yeah.
let's start with the company first.
So companies and leadership need to look and see where is their structural bias that's been put into the way that careers and talent come into the company, work in the company, and leave the company. And it's important that you take a look and recognize that people are living and working longer. There is a whole swath of productivity that you can gain. Keeping older workers in meaningful, engaged work where they love what they do with just as much passion as younger workers only increases the connection that younger workers will have with their work. It's good for the entire life cycle of the company. So, taking a really not just a succession planning approach, but a strategic approach to how does age intersect with the way that you're defining the future of work and debunking the myths, right? That myth that older workers are more expensive, for example. Dig into that a little bit more. Read that chapter in the book and
Mm,
then go through and do the math in your organization to see, is it actually true, or are we only counting certain things that are giving us a perception that that person is more expensive when really there's all kinds of costs we're not accounting for, and our financial models are upside down. So that's what I would recommend at the company level.
right.
The At the HR level, I would say that this is your moment. I started my career just as the internet was becoming a thing. Some of the earliest meetings that I attended was trying to convince senior executives that the internet was going to be a tool used for business. And through that trajectory of the internet being something a little suspect and people not sure what was going to happen next, to where we are, one thing that happened was vice presidents of technology changed from being vice presidents of IT, changed from being people whose teams connected things with wires under your desk that you called when your computer wasn't working, but otherwise you never saw them,
Those
to
days when I knew plug it.
right. You needed something, you called the IT department, they were in some terrible room in the basement, they came and plugged stuff in and then they left.
Yeah.
That was how IT was before that whole revolution happened around the late 90s and early 2000s, to the CIO, the
Mm,
CTO, the right hand of the CEO. Organizations can't run without them, the biggest influencers that are happening at the executive table. That didn't happen by accident. They stepped up. And so now, if we're in the midst of a talent revolution, HR needs to stop being the people that you call when there's a problem or when you need to do something with benefits or when something, you need to come out from under the desks connecting the wires and become the CHRO that has the eye on the people strategy that is the enabler of the engine of the entire organization. Nobody's going to give it to you. You need to do that. You need to elevate yourself and take that seat at the table by thinking about it from the business perspective, from the economic perspective, from the future planning perspective. So HR has a really important role to play to take the lead, because otherwise, workforce related discussions and workforce related decisions are going to be made by the CIO, by the COO, by someone else that doesn't have the same background, perspective, and expertise as we do, as CHROs would when it comes to people. Imagine if all the technology decisions had been made by the CFO, purely from a financial perspective, instead of from a technology perspective.
let's choose the cheapest. Let's choose the most affordable.
We wouldn't have seen nearly the same amount of innovation and growth. And that's because it's the wrong function that would be in the lead. So if we don't lead, if HR doesn't lead, someone else will. And the decisions will be made not because it's the best for the people in the workforce to empower the people within our organization, which we know is the heart and soul, but to make decisions for other reasons.
I just want to stop you there because when you were talking about how HR should come out from the tunnel or underground, and suddenly I felt this wave of, I don't know, like emotions, like I'm actually like welling up because it resonates so much with me, because that's what I also believe. And I until right now I still see a lot of HR just processing papers and all that, and they feel that, oh, this is beyond me. I don't need to have the conversation. The leadership will decide. But the fact of the matter is, to a lot of HR out there, if you don't help to decide, if you don't help to build the infrastructure, there's nothing to catch you when you are old, when you are there, right?
Right. And 70%, in a lot of cases, 70% of the operating costs of a company are related to people.
Yeah.
So you manage those people, and the way that they move through, how they're going to be productive, what are they going to be doing, how do we motivate them, how do we make sure that we're using our workforce to the best of the capabilities of the company for competitive advantage. The bulk of the cost within the company falls within your domain. So the
Yeah.
financial discussions are your responsibility.
Yeah. Yeah. True. Okay. Last thing, which is the worker.
Individual. So
Yeah.
the last piece of
Individual.
advice that I give to individuals is that you have agency over your own career. That the future is not something that someone else sets for you and you just need to prepare for what your future is or prepare for what your next step will be. The actions, the conversations you have, the way that you think about yourself and your own career actually shapes the future that you're going to have available to you. So the more that you can recognize, who are you? What do you like? What do you need? What are you good at? And where are there problems around you that you want to be a part of solving? The more that you can really understand those things and then take steps to have conversations with other people so that you can shape your own career, you put yourself in charge of your own career as opposed to waiting for someone to tap you on the shoulder or to give you an opportunity. So, my advice to individuals is to stop preparing for a future that someone else has just determined for you and instead shape the future that you want and then gather people around you who can make that happen. And that's advice for people of all ages. You can do that as a student, you can do that in your 20s, 40s, 60s, you can do that all the way through your life course.
Wow. That's really like many things to take away, but really good advice. Now because actually I'm at age whereby like you mentioned, I'm aging, right? And I'll perhaps be hitting like the 40s soon and all that. I think
It'll be
I'm
okay. You'll be okay, Jerviel.
yeah, actually that's true. You know, I walked past 30 years of my life where I am right now. I'm fine. I should be fine.
Yeah.
And I think we will all be fine. So let not age be something that deters us to do our own planning and all that for the individual. I think for the HR, step up, do your game. The COVID has shown us that we actually HR is so valuable, right? Because without us to kind of rally the team to build the infrastructure, we lose people in the great resignation, which we kind of talked about previously, right? So HR has a huge game to play. And I think for leaders out there, what you do or what you don't do sends out a message to everyone else in the company. This is why I also believe in. Yeah, great. Oh, we want to talk more, but I know Lisa has to work. But thank you so much, Lisa, for sharing so much for the past 1 hour.
My pleasure. I hope you and everyone else enjoyed it. I'd love to hear what you think. And Jervil, I'd love to continue the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely will kind of bring you back again when we can talk about something else because I think the future of work is such a huge topic, and all that. And maybe we'll bring some Jeremiah in. I think it would be like a fun fair to have everyone in the conversation. But if you want to know more, you can always follow Lisa on her LinkedIn, or you can follow Challenge Factory on the LinkedIn as well, or you can buy her book, which I will be sharing the link in this chat as well. Otherwise, thank you so much, Lisa. Hope you have a wonderful, wonderful December and holiday. Have a good rest.
You too. And
All
have a
right.
good night.
Good. Oh, good night to me and good day to you. All right. For everyone who is watching things, thank you so much. Have a good rest and have a good week ahead. We'll catch you when we catch you again. Bye bye.
Bye.